Good afternoon, Paul, and welcome to Great Wine Online's Tastings. It's great to have you with us live here today from Canada. So,
Thanks for
Paul,
having me. Thank
you're
you for
from
having
the
me.
Henry of Pelham winery in Canada. Tell us a little bit about whereabouts the winery is.
Well, the main grape growing region in Canada is called the Niagara Peninsula. And so we're located, it's the provinces in Ontario. And I'm sure everybody knows of Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
So we're about 20 minutes from Niagara Falls. So we're very close to the US border, and we're about an hour away from Toronto.
So Canada isn't perhaps necessarily somewhere that we think of as a wine growing region necessarily.
No, you're usually probably think of igloos and moose and mounties, but
Exactly.
and maybe mountains. But no, we actually where we're located, the main feature that allows us to create that reason we have this microclimate are the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes are massive. They're just, it's an incredible amount of water. And the two Great Lakes that we sit around are Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. And our wine region really benefits from Lake Ontario. And because Lake Ontario warms up during the summer, it gives off warm air during the winter. And then in the summer, it gives off cool air. It moderates our climate. In Niagara, it might be hard to understand, but Niagara and the Toronto area, we get a very hot summers, extremely hot, like it's 25 to 30 degrees centigrade, no problem. The other interesting thing is we'll get a very cold winter, and so
Yeah, we know
that
about the cold winters, but that surprises me about the hot summers, I have to
yeah,
say.
yeah. So it allows us to grow these European grape varieties.
Now, am I right in thinking that you are fifth generation of your family owning this winery?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but the short version is the land was settled by my great 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 grandfather. The winery is relatively new, but it is on family land.
And the name, Henry of Pelham, where does that come from?
Well, Henry was my great 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 grandfather, and his father fought in the American Revolutionary War for the British, and
Wow.
when the British lost that war, they came up into Canada and they were awarded Crown land, and they were loyalists, so they were awarded 100 acres for himself, 100 acres for his wife, and 100 acres for each of his children. And he had 14 children at the time. So he ended up with this huge amount of land right where the winery sits. And over the years, they basically cleared the land and settled it ultimately. And Henry's youngest son, or Nicholas's youngest son, was Henry, and he built an old building that ran as an inn in 1842. And when we were starting to look for names for the winery, we realized that when he went to get a liquor license for the inn, because in Canada you still needed a liquor license, even in 1842, he signed his name Henry of Pelham, even though his last name was Henry Smith. And as we dug deeper into that, Pelham Township is across the street from the winery, and there's a road, Pelham Road, that the winery borders on. And so he named the winery Henry of Pelham, recognizing where the winery was located, or where he signed his name Henry of Pelham, recognizing where the winery was, where his inn was at the time. We also think there's a little humor there, because there was a British prime minister named Henry Pelham in and around that time. So that's where we got the name for the winery.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit more distinctive than Henry Smith, I suppose. But
Yes,
okay.
yes.
The mind boggles at what 1,600 acres of prime Niagara wine growing land would be worth now.
Yes, I'd probably be retired right now. But we actually bought the last remaining parcel of land that had been in the family since 1794 is what we purchased in 1982. My dad purchased it from our cousin, uh, Smith, and we purchased it from him. Just my dad bought it just to keep it in the family name. It was a small piece of land, and wasn't the Niagara wine industry wasn't as sexy as it is today, so it was very inexpensive. And then we actually planted the first vineyard in 1984. So yeah, my cousin sold off basically 1,600 acres over that time period.
Wow.
Otherwise, I'd be a baron or something.
So in that 1,600 acres, how many different grape varieties are you currently growing?
Now we currently have put together 300 acres of that
Right.
original plot all together, and we have about 10 different grape varieties.
Gosh.
Uh, yeah, mostly Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, and then in red, Baco Noir, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Pinot Noir. That's in Gamay. Those are sort of the main guts of what we grow.
Yeah, we're going to invite you back later in the year actually to do a tasting across several of your different wines, specifically from your winery. But today we're actually looking at the Baco Noir, which has proved to be an incredibly popular product for us here. So Steve, you and I tasted it a couple of weeks ago now for the first time, and we're absolutely blown away. Fabulous wine.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
what really surprised none of our viewers that evening had ever tried Baco Noir, and none of them had ever heard of it before. And so it was a real revelation, hugely popular, somewhat reminiscent of a Ripasso style wine, or an Appassimento, the sort of Italian style, that
Absolutely.
softness. And we served it to our viewers with some gorgeous blue cheese, which they absolutely adored.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, it's a very good insight into that kind of richer style wine. And I'm not surprised they've not heard of it, because it's what's called a French hybrid. It was originally cloned in France in the 1900s, early 1900s, and was grown in France for a period of time, and it made its way to Niagara in the 1950s. And we planted it. It's very winter hardy, and it also ripens very early. So it's one of the varieties. We actually bring Baco Noir into the winery before we bring our white wines in, because it just gets so incredibly ripe.
Really?
And the skins are very thin, but it gets very juicy, extremely ripe. It's very consistent. And one of the features of this grape variety is that most red wines, you get the color from fermenting on the skins. The actual flesh of the grapes, clear, it's white. Baco Noir is different. It actually has some red in it. So that's when you look at the Baco Noir and you just take a look at the color, you can just see that intense color. That's partially from the skins, of course, but also from the flesh of the grape.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It really was a very juicy, and as Steve says, somebody else on the call suggested that it was very like a ripasso, and I think that richness you can tell just by smelling it. Actually, it's absolutely fabulous. So no, thank you, Paul. Steve, have you got any other questions you'd like to ask Paul before we let him go?
No, I think that's just about covered it, actually, Penny. And I shall look forward to seeing Paul later in the year to try some of the other great wines, and look forward to enjoying some Baco Noir in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for coming and joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon.
We will. Take care.
Bye now.